Hi everyone! Welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing a video I've been seeing go around in the community for a while that I've always wanted to try, and it's reacting to unpopular bookish opinions that you all provide for me. And I've seen several other creators do this, most notably Elle from Elliot Brooks, whose channel I will link down below, as well as her video of her reacting to unpopular opinions. I've also seen other creators do this, so I'm just going to link a couple other videos down below if you like these types of videos and you want to check out some other people doing them. But today, I asked you on my community tab last week, give me any and every unpopular opinion you have, and you all definitely delivered. I have a ton of comments to that community post, and I've tried to make it where I haven't seen or read really any of them. Before we start reacting to some unpopular bookish opinions, I really want to thank this video's partner, Dossier, who is once again so kindly collaborating with me on today's video. You all know, if you've been watching my channel, I absolutely love Dossier. I love working with them. If you haven't heard me talk about them already, Dossier is a fragrance company that prides itself on being able to deliver high quality, luxury inspired fragrances at a very fair price, giving you all, the consumer, the freedom to explore new scents risk-free. So the way it works, your Dossier order arrives in the mail, and now it's time to test out your new perfume. So if you love the smell, amazing, keep it, use it, cherish it. If you don't love the smell, then you are always able to return this bottle, no questions asked, just using the return label that Dossier provides you. So it truly is risk-free. It's a fantastic way to try out new perfume scents. And I love that every single one of these bottles is inspired by a luxury fragrance that they let you know of. So for example, my two that I have featured in today's video that I am in love with are Woody Sage, which has top notes of fig tree and grapefruit, and base notes of sage and amberwood. And it's like fall in a bottle. It smells so good, and it's inspired by Jo Malone's Wood Sage and Sea Salt cologne. So if you know the luxury fragrance, if you love that luxury fragrance, it's easy to find exactly which scent to choose on Dossier's website. The other one I have that is truly like summer in scent form, I love it so much. It's Fruity Almond. It has top notes of almond and peach and base notes of tonka bean and vanilla and cocoa. I mean, how good does that sound? It smells incredible. This one is inspired by Carolina Herrera's Good Girl Eau de Perfume. I am not fancy enough to be able to pronounce that. So truly, Dossier is a part of every single morning with me. All of my morning routines always include spraying Dossier perfume on me. I love the way it makes me feel, it makes me smell. So if you're looking for luxury inspired fragrances at a fraction of the cost, please look no further than Dossier. I will link all of the information for them down below. They are fantastic. Definitely go check them out, and thank you so much once again to Dossier for partnering with me on today's video. Go ahead and open up this post, and let's see what you all have today for me. First one that I see is mass market paperback is the best book format, and publishers trying to move away from it is the worst thing they've done in the last 10 years. Wow. So I feel like this is an ongoing joke between myself and Alan from the Library of Alexandria. I do not love mass market paperbacks, so I think that this is quite funny. That you think they're the best. I mean, that's awesome. And I feel like they are so much cheaper compared to any other book format. So the fact that you love them is great, because hopefully you're not spending, too much money getting like super fancy hardcovers. But for me, mass market paperbacks I don't like how teeny the font is. And you'll be like halfway through a book and feel like you've read none of it because it's so tight and compact, and it just seems like it goes on forever and ever. I read the entire Outlander series in mass market paperback. Those are actually the only mass market paperbacks I have. Let me tilt you up and show you. Do you see? They're right up there. There they are, the entire series. And it was such a pain because each of them were over 1,000 pages. And while it was super easy to travel with them, oh my gosh, reading from them was so difficult. I felt like it took so long. So I don't love mass market paperbacks, but I love that you do because they are a lot cheaper compared to other editions. Okay, the next unpopular opinion. The books that blow up on BookTok are mostly books for people who don't read very much, meaning the stories are gripping, but the writing isn't great. Ah, interesting. Okay, so I am not on BookTok, but obviously I know of BookTok because everyone talks about all the books that are hyped over on BookTok. And I feel like a lot of those books that are hyped over there kind of bleed or leak onto BookTube, where a lot of people like react or do reading vlogs of like reading the most popular BookTok books. So I totally know what's popular on BookTok. And I also find it very interesting to see what does blow up on BookTok and then like actually reading those books. It's very interesting. Sometimes I don't love the books that are super hyped over there. And what's really interesting is I almost feel like BookTok is a time capsule where it's taking all of the books that were popular on BookTube 10 years ago and just bringing them back to the surface. It's so bizarre. Like all those Colleen Hoover books, like the We Are Liars, like Mortal Instruments, like all these books had their moment on BookTube years ago, and now all of a sudden they're just popping up again because of BookTok. So I just think it's fascinating to see what does blow up over there. I think a lot of it is romance heavy or like fantasy romance heavy, which is probably why sometimes I just don't vibe with some of the BookTok recommendations as much. That's not something that I love in my books or in my fantasy books. I don't love fantasy romance. So yeah, it's interesting. But I like your take that it's for people who don't read very much. That's interesting. Or maybe it's for people who are like just getting back into reading. Like maybe they used to be readers and they're getting back into reading and haven't read a lot of these popular books that were, you know, popular years ago, and maybe they weren't reading or they're younger, so they, you know, were too young when those books originally came out. It's all very interesting. BookTok is fascinating. The next one, the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas is so much better than the ACOTAR series. I feel like this may not be as unpopular. I think ACOTAR is, by far more popular than Throne of Glass, but I think a lot of people that I've seen at least prefer Throne of Glass over ACOTAR. I will say I think Throne of Glass is just doing something totally different than ACOTAR is. I think ACOTAR is leaning so much more into the fantasy romance elements, and Throne of Glass feels much more epic in scope. It feels much more like an epic high fantasy. So I can see if that's more of your taste in fantasy books, if you like more of like the world building, the politics, the adventure, and the, you know, big epic battles. Throne of Glass is definitely going to be more the series for that versus ACOTAR. While it has some of those elements, it is so focused on the romance, and that really is what made that series, I think, so popular. So depending on your taste, I can see why Throne of Glass would be preferred. The next one, no. I just saw like the first couple words of this one. Brandon Sanderson isn't really that good of a writer. Characters are pretty one-dimensional, at least from the books I've read, and the writing style is so juvenile and repetitive. Well, let me like hide my Brandon Sanderson books. So I love Brandon Sanderson, so this is quite funny. I mean, I see a lot of people not love Brandon Sanderson's writing, and I get it. It's super basic, straight to the point writing. It's not flowery. It's not anything that's doing something spectacular. I feel like his writing is really just there to serve the plot and the characters. It's interesting that you call the characters one-dimensional. I would disagree. I love Sanderson's characters so much. But I mean, I get it. Like, every book is not going to be for everybody. So this is something that I've seen quite a lot of people say, just they aren't impressed with Sanderson's writing or his characters. So I get it. I just personally don't agree, obviously. All right, the next one I see, relationships portrayed in YA are often problematic and shouldn't be glorified. Yeah, so I do agree with this, because I have read a lot of YA at this point, and yeah, I would say especially some of like the older YA, like I'm thinking like Twilight era YA, like some of those relationships, we should not model our own relationships in real life out of them. Now, do I love following those types of relationships in fiction? Absolutely. I love me some messy drama in relationships, but it is interesting that so much of that is found in YA books. I do think it's gotten better. Like, some of the YA that I've read more recently has gotten a lot better with that. If you want a great example of some great relationships in YA, I would have to point out like Raybearer by Jordan E. Fueko does this really well. I would say Fireborn and the Aurelian Cycle by Rosaria Munda does this really well. Like, there are several that I've read recently that have gotten a lot better about this. So maybe this is something that they're trying to make better. But yeah, a lot of the relationships are not so healthy in YA. I definitely don't think that those should be glorified in any way. Yikes. Yeah, we should not model our own relationships off of Twilight or any of the other like super popular YA books. Even like ACOTAR, I would say, it's like not the best. All right, the next one. I think Arya Stark is a sociopath. And that there is a serious problem with people rooting for her. That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. And then so I'm reading the replies to this one. Someone added this person to Arya's kill list. That's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, Arya Stark is kind of a sociopath. I cannot disagree. I really like that unpopular opinion. All right, the next one. I think Joe Abercrombie is the most overrated fantasy author working today. I don't get it. Wow. Yeah, I mean, Abercrombie is incredibly hyped. And I actually find it surprising, because I feel like his books are a lot more niche than other fantasy books I've read, because of how plotless at least some of them seem. All of his books rely on you loving his characters, and if you don't love his characters or love his humor, then I can totally see why his books would not be for you. So it is surprising to me how hyped and how popular he really is, because I feel like his books don't have the mass market appeal that some other fantasy books do. That being said, I really like Abercrombie's characters and humor, so for me, I like his books, but I can totally get why you would think he's overrated. That makes sense to me. All right, the next one. There is so much amazing fantasy that will never be as hyped as ACOTAR and Fourth Wing because people are shallow. Oh man, well, I mean, I agree that, like, I think that there's amazing fantasy out there that's much, much better than ACOTAR. I haven't read Fourth Wing yet, but I've seen so much about Fourth Wing. Yes, there's amazing fantasy out there that I think deserves all the hype in the world, so much more than what some of the most popular fantasy books gets. But it's, yeah, I don't know. It's because people are shallow, or people just, there's some quality about the writing that just like keeps people super engaged, or like the marketing for those books is just off the charts, and it's just the marketing is so spot on to the right demographic that would enjoy those types of books. I don't know what it is, but yeah, I mean, that's a huge reason why I love doing this channel, is because I love finding amazing fantasy that maybe other people haven't heard of or aren't as hyped, and hopefully getting word out. Yeah, it is sad that some of my favorites will just never reach that level. Red Rising wouldn't be half as popular if Pierce Brown wasn't hot. Wow. I mean, I've seen pictures of Pierce Brown. He's easy on the eyes, we'll say that. I don't know. I feel like a lot of people don't know anything about authors. Like when I go into a book, I most often don't know what authors look like. I don't know anything really about the author's like personal life or anything like that. I just go into a book if I think it sounds good. So I don't know how many people know even what Pierce Brown looks like before going into Red Rising. So I don't know if that's true, but that's funny. I mean, Pierce Brown is quite handsome. All right. I can't stand V.E. Schwab's books. I've tried several, and they are the cure for insomnia. Well, I'm glad that they're your cure for your insomnia. That is great. I'm glad that they can at least lull you to sleep. That's always nice. But yeah, I love V.E. Schwab. There have been a couple books that haven't worked as well for me that I've read from her, but I just love her ideas. Her ideas sometimes are so unique. And I mean, Vicious is by far my favorite V.E. Schwab book. So I don't know which ones you've read or how many you've tried, but if you've tried Vicious and have still been lulled to sleep by that one, then maybe, yeah, I would not recommend any other V.E. Schwab books to you. Next one, A Storm of Swords was just fine. What? Okay, I like the Game of Thrones show a lot better than the A Song of Ice and Fire books. Oops. A Storm of Swords is just fine. Now, listen, I would understand if you had said any other book in the A Song of Ice and Fire series is just fine. Like, some of them are, like, not my favorite. Like, I would say A Dance with Dragons, A Feast for Crows, like, some of those, like, later books, not my favorite, but A Storm of Swords? Everything happens in A Storm of Swords. That one's amazing. So, I mean, A Song of Ice and Fire, the books themselves, I had read them after I'd watched the TV show. So my experience reading the books was heavily influenced by my love for the show. So I don't know if I would have loved them as much if I hadn't seen the show before going into those books, especially because the writing does at times get super dense and the world itself is very complex. It's very political. So I don't know if I would have loved the books as much. I love the books because at times I had like the show in my head, or I had the characters from the show in my head, and it really did influence a lot of that experience for me. But I really enjoy the books. But I get it. I get it if you don't love the books and you like the show more. I mean, the show's amazing, except for season 8. We won't talk about that. Okay, but you have other parts of your unpopular opinion comment, so I'm gonna keep reading. Rhythm of War was a chore to read. Oh man. It's killing me. Because of the deep dives into the magic. I didn't sign up for a science lesson. Okay, I have seen a lot of people not like Rhythm of War as much because of how heavy it was on like the science behind the magic in that world. I totally get that. I personally loved it. I loved that part of the book, but I can understand completely why someone wouldn't. So that makes sense to me. Rhythm of War is probably my favorite in the series because I loved that science. I loved some of the character arcs. Oh my gosh, Kaladin's story in Rhythm of War, so good. So, but I get it. Also, self-pub and indie SFF books are superior to traditional publishing in terms of intriguing and refreshing stories. I love that. I love that unpopular opinion. Is that unpopular at this point? I mean, there are so many great self-pub books out there in science fiction and fantasy right now. And there's incredible booktubers that focus on those types of books. I mean, I can think of several, like, I know Bookborn is doing a lot of the SPFBO stuff, as well as Andrew's Wizardly Reads. reads so much self-published fantasy, as well as Petrick, whose channels I will all link down below. So I know that there are so many channels like Leslie at the Nerdy Narrative, Pete from Pete's Ponderings. I mean, all these channels you got to go check out if you're looking for self-published fantasy recommendations. This is something I definitely want to get more into, and I can see why you would think this. I think a lot of the traditional published stories right now are leaning hard into trends or tropes that they know are popular and are hyped and are working well. So I can see why, if you're getting tired of traditionally published stories, that might be why. And yeah, self-published does not have those same limits. So I definitely want to check out more and prioritize more self-published books. That is a goal of mine for sure. All right, next. I hate Stephen King's writing. He is the epitome of a kid extending an essay's word count by adding filler words. Did anybody else used to do that? I totally did that. I read Salem's Lot and could have liked it if it was 400 pages shorter. That's fair. Doesn't help that the story was mediocre, but I remember thinking, I think a 6-page chapter of him describing the breeze of spring. He's long-winded, I will say. I tried and dropped 4 other books of his, and it's all the same. Filler words filling up 2/3 of each page, simply too wordy. The books I have finished of his, again, are mediocre. Overrated author, or I'm an idiot, not able to, you're not an idiot. I'm an idiot, not able to understand his brilliance, which I'm fine with. You're not an idiot. I've seen a lot of people say this about Stephen King. He is very long-winded, and I feel like I did a review of It, and I think it is quite bloated. Like, I think that could have been so much shorter. I mean, it is over 1,000 pages. It's huge. And I don't think it needed to be that long. But I think I said this in my review video, and I had a lot of people like, absolutely not. Every word mattered. Every page counted. Everything was so necessary. I was like, oh my gosh. So I think that there are some like diehard Stephen King fans where they love the length of the story. They love that he does go into so much detail and depth on everything. But I get it. I totally think some of what you're saying about some of the books that I've read from him. I will say, I think there are a couple of stories that have really worked for me that are on the shorter side for Stephen King, like Misery, like Carrie. Those are 2 of my favorites by Stephen King, and I think it's telling that they're also, I think, the shortest, or at least some of the shortest novels from him. So there are some stories that work really well, but I agree. I think some of his books could definitely be edited down, and you would not lose much. So yikes. Okay, I'm gonna do one more because this video could be very, very long. If I don't kind of cut it off somewhere. I'm gonna try to see if I can find one that has a ton of likes. Okay. I cannot stand when people say they read 20 to 30 books in a month and it was 99% audio at 2.5 times speed, and then blame not liking it on the audio or not being able to follow along. Yeah. So I have to say, I don't follow anyone who does this. So I'm curious, like how many people actually do this, but I will say that for me, audiobooks, I love audiobooks, and I do try to listen to them at sometimes like 1.5, 1.75, or 2 times speed, depending on the narrator and depending on the accent of the narrator. Like sometimes I just can't listen to them that quick. But there are certain audiobooks that I've had to stop because the story is way too complicated for an audiobook. Like I've decided, for me, I cannot listen to fantasy books on audio unless I'm doing immersion reading where I'm reading the physical text at the same time as I'm listening to the audiobook, because I can't follow. I can't follow what's going on. Now that's not to say that everyone feels the same way. I've seen a lot of people read fantasy via audio and have absolutely no problem recounting every plot point and thing that happened, even more so maybe than I even could, having physically read the book. So I know people can do this, where they can listen to these audiobooks very sped up and understand everything that's going on, including like very complex books. That just isn't me. But yes, if people are doing this, where they're reading a book via audio, but they don't like it because of the audiobook, or because they couldn't follow along because it was on audio, I can see that being a little hard. Again, I haven't seen anyone do this that I follow, but if you're seeing people do that, that's a bummer. That would definitely influence my review of it. If I didn't like the audiobook, I think I would just stop it. All right, well, there were so many comments, so I could do a part 2 if you all liked this style video. Thank you all so much for submitting all your comments. Oh my gosh, I want to keep this post up, because if I do a part 2, I want to get to the other comments that I wasn't able to get to during this video. So let me know if you do want to see a part 2, and then let me know some of your unpopular opinions down below. Let's all have a chat. I love doing this. This was a lot of fun. So thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye.